All right, y'all, welcome back to Keepin the Comic, and we're picking up here on issue number 3 of Spider-Gwen, the Ghost Spider. And Spider-Gwen, she gets some new powers, man. I can't wait to kind of discuss this with you guys. So for context here, Spider-Gwen is stuck on Earth 616, right? Which was done through an arrangement by the TVA for some reason, which has not really been blatantly stated. Additionally, she was not supposed to let anyone know that she is there, especially not her spider friends, which she does not abide by. She ends up fighting crime at a bank. Then she gets stabbed by Kraven, who is not actually Kraven. She then gets saved by Peter, Miles, and Cindy Moon. And then later on, she's lured away to a building by someone who she thinks is Peter, only to find out it was actually the Chameleon, which is where we pick up on here in the story. Now, the Chameleon has stolen Gwen's entire look and is now out in the public doing various terrible things. Now, the Chameleon first starts out by turning over a kid's ice cream cone and then telling them that the sugar will rot their teeth. I'm like, bro, like, why you gotta bother the children, man? He also has done some other things like assaulting civilians, which of course that makes sense for a criminal, robberies, carjacking, and destroying public property. And it's pretty obvious what he's trying to do here, right? He's trying to intentionally tarnish Spider-Gwen's name. Now, speaking of Spider-Gwen here, the Chameleon has her trapped in a basement of some sort. And at this time, she's kind of just like contemplating all that has led up to this point. Now, she ultimately feels like she is the one to blame for all the things that are currently happening right now, considering that Ouroboros from the TVA did tell her that she was supposed to lay low, not have her friends find out who she is, and he specifically told her not to wear the suit because if she did, it would put everyone else in danger. Although he never specified what that danger would be, it would kind of seem that with all the things that are unraveling right now, that the thing has come true, right? Now, she continues on with these thoughts, but then we see her dad walking to her, which is a little bit shocking here because technically Gwen's family is supposed to still be in her universe. So this is definitely either a dream or some hallucination that she's having. She does say like out loud that like, this cannot be real, to which he replies, well, of course not. You left me on a different Earth without saying goodbye. So clearly Gwen is feeling a lot of guilt with her current situation right now, with the Chameleon terrorizing the city and her abandonment of her family. And of course, her, making the mistake of not listening and all that stuff. Like it's all kind of too much for her at this point. Now, her dream dad, I'm gonna just call him the dream dad, gives her an analogy that would help, which is clearly something that he's probably said to her before because this is coming from her subconscious. So he mentions, I once saw a flower growing through concrete right up out of the middle of the road. And he continues by saying, not every problem has the same solution. You don't always have to punch concrete, and you certainly don't have to do it alone. And he's right. She does have the spider people, the spider friends that she has here. I mean, they already know who she is, so she might as well lean on them for help. Now, as her father's dream ghost disappears, I know I keep on coming up with like these interesting names to call him, but as her dream ghost father here disappears, Gwen starts to feel something kind of like bubbling up inside of her, and she's very unsure as to what it is. And then we start to see her eyes start to glow blue or white, whichever one, and as the pressure kind of keeps on building here. And then she starts to spew what looks like this kind of bluish white beam out of her mouth. And then that beam blasts a hole through the roof of the place where she was being held, which we kind of see that it's like just a ship. She's like out on a ship that's docked out in the water here. She blows a roof through that thing. And with Gwen, we see what looks like lightning pulsing around her hands. And I'm like, why do we keep on having to come back to electrical powers? You know what I mean? Like, why can't we find something different? Especially considering that we, like with Miles, I don't know. Either way, let's move on from here. But yeah, she has these powers and they're going to show up a little bit later on again. So she uses it to break through the chains, right? Which it's a good thing that she did that because fake Gwen was just about to drop a civilian off the roof just for funsies. Now, real Gwen, she shows up and she was able to catch homeboy here, but he doesn't know the difference between real Gwen and fake Gwen. So this dude's like freaks out about the whole thing because, I mean, listen, it is rather confusing, right? Now, the other civilians around her, they aren't too thrilled either about her presence. And Gwen is just looking at them like, hey, you guys have never seen any clones or doppelgangers before? Like, you know, she's, I guess, yeah, she's probably just making fun of it, right? Trying to make light of the situation, which is a rough situation. So this leads into a showdown between fake Gwen and real Gwen. And real Gwen, let's be real, man, she's kind of off her game here, and fake Gwen is just taking advantage of it. Real Gwen is overly concerned about who is actually behind her mask instead of focusing on the actual fight that is going on, and it's costing her. She gets thrown into a taxi car, and then Chameleon flips the question on her. She's like, listen, the real question here is, who are you? Because technically you don't exist, right? Because in this universe, Gwen Stacy, she dead. So like this, like he's like, yo, you don't exist in this universe. So he slams her up against the wall vigorously. And the only thing that really stopped him was that a cop shot him in the shoulder, telling him, or actually he said, surrender yourselves, is what he says, which only turns out bad for the cop in the end, because the Chameleon turns on the cops and even takes and throws one of the cars at the cop and the civilians that were there. So then real Gwen, she steps in and she starts to kind of like remind herself a little bit here. Like before she steps in fully, she like starts to remind herself of the hallucination that she was having with her dad, reminding herself that she can be a flower that can grow through concrete, you know, which to me ultimately means that you can find beauty in the hard times, right? Because up until this point, Gwen has been viewing everything through a very negative lens, wallowing in self-pity. But although this is kind of a hard time for her, she can still find a way to grow through the hard time. That's the way I interpret the analogy. Now, she saved the civilians and goes to jump after fake Gwen, who this time is pulling up sand from the ground. And I'm like, bro, like, how is he doing this? Like, I know Chameleon is able to mimic the looks of other people, but I did not think that Chameleon could mimic powers. This thing has been very confusing so far. So it looks like he has Sandman powers here, and he starts to kind of bury real Gwen under the sand. This entire time, Gwen is like reflecting. She's like asking herself, like, why doesn't she say sorry more? Why is it that everywhere that she goes or everything that she touches is seemed to turn into destruction? So in a way, the sand that's currently burying her right now is basically like a metaphor for her burying herself in her emotions, which this time leads to another surge of like power building up inside of her. And in a matter of moments, she erupts and that electrical power explodes from her again. And this sends fake Gwen flying. Cars are flying, and then it leads to Gwen. She just blacks out. So then we see Miles, who finds her in the aftermath here. And what she did, I'm not gonna lie to you, looks pretty impressive. There's like a massive hole in the ground. There's a tree trunk on the side. By the way, like you can also see the leaves that are kind of like under her as well, which I thought was like kind of like a nice attention to detail here. Now, she was incredibly concerned that she might have hurt someone, but Miles assures her that she didn't, or at least he said, yeah, you didn't, but you know, you could have, right? So they get to talking about how someone has been impersonating her here, and Miles lets her know that his name is the Chameleon. Now, the key detail here is that he mentions that he never used to be able to mimic powers. Yeah, that's what I've been saying, right? And then that's like the confusion to me right now. Like, how is he able to mimic powers? So then Cindy Moon also lets the crew know that he is missing. And then Miles makes plans to go and find him while Gwen is still on the floor, kind of, you know, she's like crying here. And she's like, because she's terrified of the fact that she could have actually hurt someone in the process. Now, meanwhile, we flash to this another scene here where this villain named Black Tarantula. Now, Black Tarantula was a guy who had sent the Chameleon after Gwen in the first place, because in the first issue here, Gwen had stopped a robbery, which kind of messed up his whole plans. So then he sent the Chameleon after her. So there is this guy that's telling Black Tarantula, yo, it might be dangerous for you to try to go see, and he's talking about Chameleon because his energy readings are off the charts and it's affecting his powers right now. So he insists on seeing him anyways. And when he goes to open up the door, we see the Chameleon, who had turned into Electro, and he's there like asking for help. He's like, help. And while he like starts to shift again into the Green Goblin, he says, I need more power. So listen, Gwen Stacy right now, she needs therapy. The Chameleon, this dude seems to need some medical expertise, and we still have some questions that need answers. Like, what is going on with Chameleon? How can he mimic powers now? Like, how is that possible? Why does Gwen have these powers as well in the first place? Is this kind of like one of the reasons why she can no longer go back to her universe? What exactly did she do to the Chameleon? I guess we'll find out next time, guys, when we pick up issue number 4 here. But please, if you have not done so already, leave a like on this video here for the YouTube algorithm. Join our Discord here for more updates. The link is in the description of this video. And subscribe if you haven't done so already to the channel. Appreciate you. And as always, thanks so much for kicking it with Keepin' It Comic.